Too old to catch a man's eye. Too old to be loved. The words rang out sharp across Dry Creek's dusty street, spat like venom from the lips of a woman standing on the boardwalk. Her friends snickered beside her. Imagine a boy like Cole Dawson looking twice at her. Lord above, he'd have to be desperate. Evelyn's heart froze mid-step, clutching her basket of laundry tighter. Her face didn't flinch, but her heart thudded like a hammer. She knew the whispers. She'd lived with them for years, but today they were louder, crueler. Cole Dawson had been tying his horse nearby, his shoulders stiffened, eyes narrowing at the insult. He turned, voice sharp as broken glass. "Say that again." The women gasped, then smirked. One lifted her chin. "We said she's a dried-up widow, and you're a fool for even looking her way. A boy like you ought to be in the arms of someone younger, someone worth havin'." Laughter rippled down the street, drawing a small crowd. Evelyn's cheeks burned. She dropped her eyes, willing the earth to swallow her whole. Cole stepped forward, fists clenched. "You keep her name out of your mouths, or I'll—" "You'll what?" the taller woman shot back, loud enough for half the town to hear. "Fight the whole of Dry Creek just to defend an old woman's pride." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the creak of the saloon's swinging doors. All eyes fixed on Evelyn, on her trembling hands, on Cole's defiance. And in that moment, the line between shame and courage was drawn clear as the desert horizon. Before we dive into the story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got an extra special story waiting for you, one that'll touch your heart and blow your mind. Don't miss it. The morning after the whispers, Evelyn Hart bent low over her fence rail, trying to mend the splintered wood with stiff hands. The storm 2 nights back had broken it clean, and the cattle from Bart Slade's ranch had trampled through like they owned her land. She pressed the nail to the post, but her hammer slipped, rattling against the wood. "Need a hand?" The voice startled her. She turned and saw Cole Dawson standing just beyond the fence, his hat tipped low, a rope coiled over his shoulder. Sunlight caught the sweat on his brow, and for a moment she saw not a boy, not a reckless ranch hand, but a man, steady and strong. "I can manage," Evelyn muttered, too quickly. She struck the post again, missing the nail. The sting of embarrassment flushed her cheeks. Cole stepped forward, calm but insistent. "Let me." He took the hammer from her hand with an ease that made her fingers tremble. His calloused knuckles brushed hers, and she pulled back too fast, as though burned. In silence he drove the nail home with 3 hard strikes. Dust rose around them, the sound echoing sharp against the dry desert air. Evelyn turned away, clutching her shawl tighter. "People are already talking, Mr. Dawson." "You ought not be seen here." He paused, then leaned on the post, meeting her eyes. "Let 'em talk. Ain't their fence, and sure as hell ain't their life." For a heartbeat their gazes locked. The air between them carried something unspoken, fragile, dangerous, and real. Evelyn broke it first, stepping back toward the house. But the tremor in her hands betrayed her. The Silver Spur Saloon was alive with smoke and music. Lydia Cross's voice floating over the piano like honey poured on whiskey. Men laughed too loud. Boots thudded against the floorboards. And the night smelled of sweat and spilled ale. Cole Dawson leaned on the bar, sipping whiskey slow, trying to push away the day's whispers. But Lydia spotted him from the stage, her lips curling into a sly smile. When her song ended, she slipped down among the tables, skirts swaying, eyes fixed on him. "Well now," she purred, sliding beside him. "The boy Cowboy himself. Or should I say, the widow's pet?" The men nearby chuckled. Cole's jaw clenched. "Careful, Lydia." "Oh, don't get sore." She touched his arm, her voice carrying just loud enough for others to hear. "But really, Cole, Evelyn Hart? She's old enough to rock a cradle and a chair at the same time. You could have any girl in Dry Creek. Why chase after a woman who's long past bloom?" Laughter erupted. Tankards slammed on tables. One ranch hand shouted, "Careful she don't break a hip, boy!" Cole's face flushed hot. He shoved his glass onto the counter so hard the whiskey spilled. The saloon went tense, men shifting in their chairs, waiting for a fight. Lydia leaned closer, her smile sharp as a knife. "Admit it, Cole. It's a joke. You don't love her. You can't. She's too old to be loved." The words hit harder than a fist. Evelyn wasn't even there to defend herself, yet her dignity was being torn apart in front of half the town. Cole's hand hovered at his belt, knuckles white. The silver spur went silent. All eyes locked on the young cowboy, waiting to see if he'd strike a woman or swallow the shame. The next morning, Dry Creek's Main Street was still buzzing from the saloon gossip. Men leaned against posts, women whispered near the mercantile, and Evelyn Hart walked with her shawl pulled tight, head bowed. Cole Dawson saw it all, every whisper burning in his gut like cheap whiskey. "Cole!" The voice came from behind. He turned to see Sheriff Amos Pike standing in the doorway of his office, one hand resting on his holster, the other pointing him inside. Cole followed, the room cool and dim against the desert sun. The sheriff shut the door. "Sit." Cole didn't. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, defiant. "If this is about last night, it's about her." Pike's eyes narrowed, his voice carrying the weight of law and friendship. "You think you're doing Evelyn Hart a favor, hanging around her, fighting her battles." "You're wrong," Cole straightened. "Wrong to defend her name. You're wrong to put her through hell she don't deserve." Pike stepped closer, his boots creaking on the wood. "That woman's carried more grief than you can imagine. She finally found her peace running that boarding house, keeping to herself. And now, folks are laughing in her face. You brought that on her." Cole's fists clenched. "I never meant, meanin' don't matter." Pike's tone cut like iron. "You're young. Folks expect you to make a fool of yourself. But her? She'll never escape their tongues now. And she's the one who'll pay the price." The silence that followed was suffocating. Cole's chest heaved, anger and shame wrestling inside him. Pike tipped his hat low. "Walk away, son. If you care for her, leave her be." Cole swallowed hard, staring at the floorboards. For the first time, doubt shadowed his defiance. The dry rattle of cattle echoed through Dry Creek's auction yard, dust hanging thick in the hot air. Ranchers crowded the pens, their shouts and bids rolling like thunder. Evelyn Hart stood near the edge, her shawl wrapped tight, only there to settle a small debt owed from a boarder. She wanted no attention. But attention found her. Bart Slade, tall and broad, with a gold watch chain glinting against his vest, leaned on the corral rail. His booming voice carried over the crowd. "Well, well, look here. Widow Hart come to buy herself a bull? Or maybe just looking for a young steer to keep her company?" The men around him roared with laughter. Some slapped their thighs, others whistled. Evelyn's face flushed crimson, though she kept her chin high. Cole Dawson heard it from across the pen. He shoved through the crowd, fists clenched, his jaw tight enough to crack. "Shut your damn mouth, Slade." Bart turned, grinning wide. "Why, if it ain't her cowboy pup." "Careful, son. You'll get folks thinking you aim to herd widows instead of cattle." The laughter doubled, cruel and sharp. Even the auctioneer stumbled, trying not to smirk. Evelyn's heart pounded. Every whisper from town, every sideways glance had built to this. And now here she was, the punchline in a game she never asked to play. Cole's chest heaved. He stepped closer, eyes locked on Slade. Say it again. Slade chuckled, leaning down so the crowd could hear. I'll say it all day long. You're wasting yourself on a woman whose best days are buried 6 feet under with her husband. The crowd fell silent at that one, the cruelty so sharp it cut the air clean. Evelyn's hands trembled against her shawl. Cole's knuckles went white. For a breathless moment, it seemed blood would be spilled right there in the dust. Night draped over Dry Creek. The town finally hushed after the cruelty of the auction. Evelyn Hart sat alone in her small boarding house, a single lantern flickering against the worn wallpaper. The echoes of laughter still rang in her ears, each word from Bart Slade etched into her memory like a scar. She set her shawl aside and faced the mirror. The glass was cracked at the corner, the reflection uneven. But it showed enough. Lines traced across her face like riverbeds through the desert. Hair streaked silver where once it had shone gold. She touched her cheek, her hand trembling. "Too old to love," she whispered, the words tasting bitter. The room answered with silence, broken only by the creak of the lantern chain. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She had endured widowhood, loneliness, and years of keeping her head high in a town that never forgot to gossip. But this, being mocked openly in the square, felt like the cruelest blow yet. Her knees weakened, and she sank into the chair by the window. Outside, the desert stars burned cold and distant. She wondered if once, long ago, love had burned that bright for her too, and if it had burned out for good. Her heart ached not for youth nor beauty, but for warmth. For someone who saw her not as a shadow of years gone by, but as a woman still capable of being wanted, still capable of being held. She closed her eyes, tears sliding free at last. "Maybe they're right," she murmured. "Maybe I am too old. Or maybe I've just been too afraid." The lantern flickered low, leaving her in darkness, alone with a heart torn between shame and desperate hope. The Silver Spur was rowdy that night, louder than usual. Cards slapped against tables, mugs clattered, and voices rose above the piano's clumsy tune. But Cole Dawson sat alone in the corner, whiskey untouched, staring into the dark swirl of it. The words from Bart Slade still rattled in his head like a rattlesnake in a box. "She's too old. Her best days are buried." Cole's fist slammed the table, rattling the glasses. A few heads turned, then quickly looked away. The young cowboy's temper wasn't a thing men liked to test. A ranch hand at the next table leaned over with a grin. "You really courting her, Dawson?" "What for? You could have your pick of girls that ain't half her age." Cole rose so fast his chair scraped the floor. His fist connected with the man's jaw before another word could be spoken. The ranch hand toppled backward, crashing through a chair, groaning in the sawdust. The saloon went quiet. Lydia Cross's laughter cut sharp through the silence. "Look at him," she purred, "bleedin' for his old woman." Cole's chest heaved, his eyes blazing. He glared around the room, voice rough as gravel. "Any of you got something to say about Evelyn Hart? You'll say it to me, and you'll pay the price." No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the slow creak of the piano player backing away from his keys. Cole grabbed his hat and strode out into the night, the doors slamming behind him. Outside, the desert air cooled the sweat on his brow. He leaned against the post, fists still shaking, breath ragged. He thought of Evelyn, her quiet strength, the way she'd hidden her pain in the street, the trembling in her hands. And in that moment, Cole swore to himself. He'd fight every damn man in Dry Creek if it meant proving her worth. She wasn't too old. She wasn't a joke. She was his. The boarding house was quiet that afternoon, the air heavy with dust and the smell of bread cooling on the windowsill. Evelyn Hart folded linens in the front room, trying to keep her hands busy. trying to keep her mind away from the memory of laughter at the auction. The door creaked open without a knock. Lydia Cross stepped inside, her perfume too sweet, her smile too sharp. She carried herself like she owned the room, her silk dress whispering against the floorboards. Evelyn stiffened. "What do you want, Lydia?" "Why, just to talk." Lydia drifted closer, brushing her gloved fingers along the edge of the table. "It's about Cole." Evelyn's breath caught, though she masked it with a careful turn back to the linens. "What about him?" Lydia's smile widened. "You must know what they're saying. The whole town thinks it's laughable. A young man like him, wasting his time on a woman who's already had her time." She tilted her head, voice dripping with mock concern. "They say you're making a fool of yourself, Evelyn. And worse, you're dragging him down with you." Evelyn's hands froze mid-fold. Her chest tightened, but she said nothing. Lydia leaned in closer, her whisper venomous. "Do yourself a kindness. Let him go, before he ruins you completely. Before every man, woman, and child in Dry Creek spits when you pass." Evelyn forced her chin high, though her voice cracked. "You should leave." Lydia chuckled low, sweeping toward the door. "Oh, I'll leave, dear." But the whispers? They'll stay. When the door shut, the silence pressed heavy. Evelyn gripped the linen tight, her knuckles white, her heart breaking under the cruel weight of truth she feared was real. The desert storm came without warning, sweeping over Dry Creek with thunder that rattled the windows and lightning that split the sky in jagged fire. Rain poured down, turning the dust into mud, hammering against the roof of Evelyn Hart's boarding house. She scrambled through the hallway, shutters banging open, the wind screaming through every crack. Her lantern flickered, shadows leaping across the walls. She pushed the shutter closed, but the wood slipped in her grip. The wind tore it wide, nearly pulling her with it. Then strong hands caught hers. "Evelyn!" Cole Dawson's voice cut through the storm. He stood soaked to the bone, rain dripping from his hat, his eyes blazing with urgency. He pushed the shutter closed with one arm, latching it tight, while his other arm braced her steady. "You shouldn't be here," she gasped, breathless. He gave a crooked grin, even as water streamed down his face. "Storm don't care about gossip. Thought you might need me." Together they fought the rattling shutters and the leak in the roof, moving through the dimly lit rooms. Each time their hands brushed, Evelyn's heart leapt, and Cole's jaw tightened as though holding back words he longed to speak. At last, with the worst secured, they collapsed near the lantern's glow, both drenched, their breaths heavy. Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces, his eyes fixed on hers trembling under the weight of what she felt. For a heartbeat, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside her chest. She pulled her shawl tighter, trying to build walls again. But Cole leaned closer, voice low, rough with honesty. "I don't care what they say. I'd rather fight 1,000 storms than watch you face one alone." The lantern flickered, the air thick, as silence carried what words could not. The storm still rolled outside, thunder rumbling like a restless drum, but inside the boarding house it had quieted. The shutters were latched, the leaks patched with rags, and the lantern on the table cast a warm, trembling glow across the room. Evelyn sat by the fire, her shawl wrapped tight, her hair damp and loose around her shoulders. She looked tired, worn, but to Cole Dawson she had never looked more alive. He stood across the room, pacing, hands restless, chest heaving like he was preparing for a fight. Finally he stopped. "I can't hold it in anymore." His voice cracked raw, stripped of swagger. "Evelyn, I don't give a damn what this town says. I don't care if they laugh or spit or call me a fool." She stiffened, eyes locked on the flames. "Cole, please." "No!" He crossed the space in 3 strides, dropping to one knee before her. His hat slid from his head, forgotten on the floor. His eyes, fierce and desperate, found hers. "You think you're too old. You think love's done with you. You're wrong. You make me feel alive in a way I never knew was possible. You're the one thing in this town worth fighting for." Her breath hitched, her heart pounding so loud she thought the storm might hear it. Tears glimmered in her eyes, though she fought them back. "You don't know what you're saying. You're young, Cole. You've got a life ahead of you. Don't waste it on me." He shook his head, a crooked, almost broken smile on his lips. "It ain't wastin'. It's livin'." The silence stretched, heavy, trembling. Evelyn turned away, clutching her shawl tighter, every part of her screaming to push him back, yet every part of her aching to let him stay. For the first time in years, hope felt dangerous. Dry Creek's main square bustled under the noon sun. Ranchers, shopkeepers, and travelers filled the street for the weekly market. Stalls brimmed with leather goods and jars of molasses, the sound of bartering mixing with the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. But beneath it all ran the same current: gossip. Evelyn Hart walked slowly through the square, basket in hand, aware of every glance, every whisper. She felt their stares burn hotter than the Arizona sun. Behind her, laughter rose from a group of men. Bart Slade at the center, Lydia Cross perched on his arm like a queen. "Well, look there," Bart drawled, his voice carrying. "The widow's still parading about. Careful, folks. Don't let your sons too close, or she'll snare 'em with gray hairs and sweet nothings." The crowd laughed, sharp and cruel. Evelyn froze, her cheeks flaming. Then came Cole. He pushed through the crowd, his boots pounding the dirt, his jaw set hard. He stopped at Evelyn's side, his hand reaching for hers. She hesitated only a moment. Then he clasped her fingers tight, lifting their joined hands high for all to see. "Enough!" His voice roared across the square, silencing the market. Every head turned. "You want to laugh? Laugh at me. But don't you dare shame her name again. She's worth more than this whole damn town put together." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lydia's smirk faltered, Bart's face flushed with rage. Evelyn trembled, her heart in her throat. But Cole's grip was firm, unyielding. "She's mine," he said, voice steady now, filled with fire. "And I'm hers. That's the truth. And I don't give a damn who knows it." The square went still, stunned into silence. Even the sheriff, leaning against his office post, tipped his hat slowly, his eyes unreadable. And there, in the heart of Dry Creek, under the judgment of every soul, Cole Dawson stood unbroken. And Evelyn Hart, against all her fears, stood with him. The silence in Dry Creek Square hung heavy, broken only by the restless stamping of a horse tied nearby. Cole Dawson's hand gripped Evelyn Hart's like iron, his declaration echoing in the hearts of everyone present. But all eyes turned to Evelyn. Her breath trembled, her pulse racing. For years she had endured whispers, insults, the cruel weight of being a widow with nothing left but her pride. Now, standing in the blazing sun, she could hide no longer. Slowly she lifted her chin. "You all ask if I'm too old to be loved," she said, her voice clear, steady, carrying farther than she thought possible. "But love doesn't wear a watch. It doesn't count the years on a face or the gray in someone's hair. It only knows the truth beating in a heart." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lydia Cross bit her lip, her smirk gone. Bart Slade's jaw tightened, but even he couldn't find words to mock. Evelyn's gaze swept the crowd, daring each of them to meet her eyes. "Yes, I'm older than him. Yes, I've lived my share of years. But if that makes me unworthy of love, then I pity every one of you who thinks the same. Because someday you'll all be where I am, and when that day comes you'll remember this moment." She squeezed Cole's hand, her shoulders square. "I will not apologize for being loved. Not today." not ever. The square fell utterly quiet. Then, slowly, Sheriff Amos Pike tipped his hat. One by one the townsfolk looked away, shame softening their faces. Evelyn and Cole turned, walking hand in hand down the dusty street. The whispers faded behind them, swallowed by the desert wind. For the first time in years, Evelyn's heart felt light, not because the town had accepted her, but because she no longer needed them to. In Dry Creek, Arizona, they had their answer. Too old to love? Never. In the dusty heart of Dry Creek, Evelyn Hart proved the town wrong. She showed them love doesn't fade with years, and Cole Dawson stood unshaken at her side. Together, they silenced the whispers and walked into a future built not on fear, but on courage. Because love is never too old. If this story stirred your heart, make sure to subscribe to Wild West Tales for more unforgettable romances of courage, sacrifice, and second chances. Tell us in the comments, do you believe love has an age, or is it truly timeless?